Most of us grew up believing that the refrigerator is the safest place for almost everything we eat. It's the go-to spot for leftovers, vegetables, bread, even fruit. But what if I told you that keeping certain foods in the fridge might actually be making them taste worse, spoil faster, or even become harmful to your health? If you are over 60 years old, this is especially important. As we age, our bodies become more sensitive to the quality and freshness of the food we eat. Simple mistakes in food storage, mistakes that are incredibly common, can lead to poor digestion, unnecessary waste, or even a trip to the doctor. In this video, we're going to talk about 8 everyday foods that most people refrigerate, but really shouldn't. And don't worry, we're not just giving you a list. I'll explain exactly why these foods don't belong in the fridge, what you should do instead, and how these small changes can help protect your health, save you money, and make your meals taste better too. Make sure to stay with me until the very end, because the final food on the list is one that almost everyone gets wrong, and fixing it is one of the easiest changes you can make. Let's get started. The story of George and his grandkids. Let me tell you about George. George is 76 years old. He's retired, enjoys fishing, and every Sunday he bakes a fresh loaf of bread for his grandkids when they come over. It's become a family tradition, something everyone looks forward to. But one weekend, his grandson took a bite of the bread and asked, "Grandpa, why does it taste dry now?" George was confused. He had followed the same recipe, used the same ingredients. The only thing he'd done differently was store the bread in the refrigerator. He thought he was helping it last longer. Instead, he had unknowingly changed its texture and taste. And that's something many of us do without realizing it. Here's the truth. Bread dries out much faster in the fridge. Cold air pulls moisture from the bread, making it go stale quickly, sometimes overnight. You might think you're preserving it, but you're actually ruining it. So what should you do instead? If you know you'll finish the loaf within a few days, keep it in a bread box or a paper bag on the counter. It'll stay soft and fresh. And if you think you won't get through it in time, slice the loaf and freeze it. That way, you can take out just what you need, toast it, and it'll still taste like it came straight from the oven. For George, this one change brought the smiles back to Sunday breakfast, and for you, it could mean better meals, less waste, and more joy in the little things. Foods that lose flavor and texture in the fridge. Let's talk about some everyday foods that we've all been putting in the fridge for years, maybe even decades, without realizing that we're actually hurting their flavor, texture, and in some cases, even their health benefits. We all want our groceries to last, especially when you've gone to the effort of planning meals, getting to the store, bringing everything home. The last thing you want is for food to spoil early. But sometimes putting something in the refrigerator feels like the safest option, when really it's doing the exact opposite. Let's start with a big one, olive oil. You might have been told that olive oil should be refrigerated to keep it fresh. But here's what actually happens. When you place olive oil in a cold environment like the fridge, it starts to solidify. It gets thick, cloudy, and hard to pour. The texture changes, and in some cases, it can start to taste slightly different too, more bitter, less smooth. It won't harm your health, but it makes cooking with it less enjoyable. Instead, store your olive oil the old-fashioned way, in a cool, dark cupboard away from your stove or any heat source. A pantry is ideal. If it's in a glass bottle, even better. Just make sure it's tightly sealed. This keeps the oil fresh, flavorful, and easy to use whenever you need it. Next on the list, garlic. Now, garlic is something most of us use regularly, whether for soups, sauces, roasting, or sautéing. But if you're putting it in the fridge, you might notice it changes quickly. It starts sprouting those little green shoots in the center. The cloves get rubbery or even moldy. And once garlic sprouts, it tastes sharper, sometimes even bitter. The reason? Garlic needs a dry environment with plenty of air circulation. The fridge, which is cold and humid, encourages sprouting and mold growth. Instead of refrigerating garlic, keep it in a bowl or basket in a corner of your kitchen, somewhere with shade and ventilation. A ceramic garlic keeper with holes works wonderfully and can keep garlic fresh for weeks. Let's move on to something everyone loves, especially in the summertime: tomatoes. If you've ever wondered why your tomatoes lose that bright, juicy flavor after just a couple of days in the fridge, here's the reason. Cold air damages their cell structure. That's what gives them that grainy, mushy texture and makes them taste bland. The fridge slows down the natural ripening process and breaks down the sugars and acids that make tomatoes taste like, well, tomatoes. To keep them at their best, store tomatoes on the counter, stem side down, in a single layer, in a bowl, or on a plate. Avoid stacking them, and don't let them sit in direct sunlight. Let them ripen naturally. When they're ready, use them and enjoy them. You'll notice the difference in every bite. Now let's talk about potatoes. This is a big one, and not just because of flavor. Refrigerating potatoes actually causes their starch to turn into sugar. This makes them taste oddly sweet and gives them a strange gritty texture when cooked. Even more important, this sugar can react during high heat cooking, like roasting or frying, and produce a chemical called acrylamide. That's something we all want to avoid, especially as we get older and need to be extra mindful about what we're putting into our bodies. The good news is that potatoes are simple to store, just not in the fridge. Keep them in a paper bag or open box in a cool, dark place like a pantry or cupboard. Make sure there's airflow and keep them away from onions, which give off moisture and gases that make both spoil faster. Now here's a familiar fruit: bananas. You've probably seen what happens when you put bananas in the fridge. The peel turns black almost overnight. The inside can become mushy and sometimes develop a fermented smell. That's because the cold slows down the ripening process on the inside, but the skin continues to react. And the result is a banana that's both underripe and overripe at the same time. Instead, leave bananas on the counter at room temperature. If they're ripening too quickly, try separating them. Take them apart from the bunch. This slows down the natural release of ethylene gas, which controls ripening. And if they're getting too ripe, don't throw them out. Peel them, slice them, and put them in the freezer. They'll be perfect for smoothies, banana bread, or just as a sweet treat. Next, let's talk about something many of us have in our pantry right now: honey. You might think keeping honey in the fridge is the safest way to avoid spoilage, but actually, honey is one of the most shelf-stable foods in the world. It doesn't need refrigeration. In fact, cold temperatures cause it to crystallize. It gets thick, grainy, and harder to scoop or spread. Kept at room temperature in a sealed jar, honey can last for years, yes, literally years, without spoiling. It's naturally antibacterial and doesn't need any help staying safe. Just store it in your cabinet or pantry, and you'll be able to enjoy it smooth and golden every time you reach for it. And last but not least, avocados. Now, this one's a little tricky because it depends on the ripeness. If you refrigerate an unripe avocado, it might never ripen at all. It will stay hard, dull in flavor, and almost impossible to enjoy. But if you let it ripen first on the counter until it gives slightly to the touch, then you can place it in the fridge to extend its freshness by a few more days. So the rule here is simple. Ripen first at room temperature. Refrigerate only after it's ripe. As you can see, these are all simple foods. You likely have several of them in your kitchen right now. And the best part? These changes are easy to make. No expensive gadgets, no complicated instructions, just a bit of knowledge and care. Coming up next, we'll talk about why this matters even more as we get older, and how eating fresh, properly stored food can help support your digestion, your energy, and your overall well-being. Ready? Let's keep going. Why freshness matters more as we age. When we're younger, our bodies are a little more forgiving. We can eat food that's not quite fresh, maybe store things a bit longer than we should, and not notice too much. But as we age, everything changes, from how our bodies digest food to how well our immune system protects us. For those of us over 60, food isn't just about taste anymore. It's about nourishment, energy, and staying healthy. Fresh food retains more of its vitamins and minerals. A tomato that's left on the counter to ripen naturally is richer in flavor, yes, but it also holds more nutrients. The same goes for leafy greens, fresh fruits, and root vegetables. When you eat these foods at their peak, your body benefits the most. You're giving yourself the best fuel. And that matters more now than ever. You may have noticed, too, that digestion becomes more sensitive with age. Foods that are stale, overly processed, or improperly stored can be harder to break down. That can lead to bloating, discomfort, or even constipation. On the other hand, fresh, well-stored foods tend to be easier on the stomach and more supportive of regular healthy digestion. But beyond the nutrition and digestion, there's something even more personal here. Fresh food just feels good. There's a certain joy in biting into a crisp apple, a pleasure in slicing into a perfectly ripe avocado, a sense of comfort in soft, fresh bread. These moments may seem small, but they're deeply satisfying, especially when you're cooking for yourself or for someone you love. When food tastes better, you want to eat better, and that's important for seniors because appetite can decrease with age. Medications, health conditions, or just life's changes can cause us to eat less than we should. But when meals are full of flavor and made from fresh ingredients, eating becomes something to look forward to again. Another benefit, you waste less. When you store your food properly and eat it while it's fresh, you throw away fewer groceries. That means more money in your pocket and fewer frustrating trips to the store. For those of us living on a fixed income, that really adds up over time. And let's not forget the emotional side of things. Many of us grew up in households where wasting food just wasn't an option. Maybe your parents or grandparents lived through the Great Depression and they passed on that sense of care, of using every bit of what you had. That mindset still matters today. Being mindful about how you store and enjoy your food brings back a little of that old wisdom. So when we talk about food storage, we're not just talking about what goes in your fridge or pantry. We're talking about supporting your health, protecting your energy, honoring your time, and bringing joy back to your meals. Up next, I'll share some easy practical tips that anyone can use to store food better and make it last longer without the guesswork. Let's keep going. Quick tips to store food better. Now that we've talked about the importance of freshness, let's go over some simple, practical tips you can start using today to keep your food tasting better and lasting longer. None of these are complicated. In fact, you might already be doing some of them, and if not, they're easy to pick up. These little habits make a big difference in how your meals turn out, how much food you waste, and how much money you save. Let's start with a common one. How to store garlic and onions. A lot of folks keep garlic and onions in the fridge without realizing that cold, humid air actually makes them spoil faster. Garlic tends to sprout and go rubbery. Onions get soft, start to mold, or grow shoots. Instead, keep both in a cool, dry, and well-ventilated spot, like a basket in your pantry or on the counter. And remember this important tip. Don't store them together. They release natural gases that cause each other to spoil more quickly. Keep them in separate places and they'll last much longer. Next, eggs. In the United States, eggs should always be refrigerated. That's because they're washed and cleaned before packaging, which removes a natural protective coating. But here's the tip. Don't store your eggs in the fridge door. That's the warmest part of the refrigerator, and it's also where temperature changes happen most often every time the door opens. Instead, Keep eggs in the middle of the fridge where the temperature stays steady. That helps them stay fresher longer. Now, let's talk about leftovers and how to keep track of them. We've all done it. You put a container in the fridge, and a few days later, you're not sure what it is or when you made it. That's how food gets wasted. An easy fix? Label everything. Use a sticky note or piece of masking tape and write the date you cooked it or opened it. Just a quick note like chicken soup Monday can save you from throwing out good food just because you weren't sure about it. If you like coffee or nuts, here's another tip. Store them in airtight containers. Coffee, especially whole beans, can lose its flavor quickly if it's exposed to air or moisture. The same goes for nuts, which can turn stale or even go rancid. Keep them in a tightly sealed jar or container in your pantry. If you want them to last even longer, especially in warmer weather, you can store them in the freezer. Now here's a big one. Don't overcrowd your fridge. It might seem like a good idea to pack everything in tightly so nothing goes bad, but when there's too much stuff in your fridge, cold air can't move around properly. That means certain items may not stay cool enough, which can cause them to spoil faster. Try to leave some space between items and group similar foods together. Dairy on one shelf, fruits and vegetables in their drawers, leftovers up front so you don't forget about them. It's safer, smarter, and much easier to find what you need. And finally, here's something simple that can really help. Keep a running list. Just a notepad on the fridge or a small dry erase board. Whenever you put something new in the fridge, like a container of soup or a half-used jar of pasta sauce, write it down. That way, you don't forget what's in there and you're less likely to let things go bad in the back of the shelf. These tips aren't just about being tidy. They're about saving money, reducing waste, and protecting your health. And they can turn your kitchen into a space that's easier to manage and more enjoyable to cook in. Coming up next, we'll explore some surprising ways to make your food last even longer without using the fridge at all. You might be amazed at how well some foods do just by storing them the old-fashioned way. Let's keep going. How to make food last without refrigeration. That might sound strange in today's world. We're used to relying on our fridge for just about everything. But there are a lot of foods that stay perfectly good, and sometimes even better, when stored outside the fridge. With just a few simple methods, many of which go back to how our parents and grandparents used to do things, you can make your food last longer and keep it tasting great. Let's start with bread. We already talked about how the fridge dries bread out and makes it go stale. But if you won't finish a whole loaf in a few days, there's a great alternative. Slice it and freeze it. That way you can take out just what you need, 1 or 2 slices at a time, and toast them fresh. The bread stays soft, the flavor stays rich, and you waste nothing. Next, fresh herbs. Herbs like parsley, cilantro, and basil tend to wilt quickly in the fridge, but there's a better way. Treat them like flowers. Trim the stems, place them in a glass of water, and leave them on the kitchen counter. Cover them loosely with a plastic bag, and they'll stay fresh for days, sometimes even a week or more. Plus, they'll make your kitchen look and smell wonderful. Now, let's talk about root vegetables, things like carrots, beets, and radishes. If you're storing them in plastic in the fridge, they may start to soften too quickly. But there's an old method that still works beautifully. Store them in a box of dry sand or sawdust in a cool, dry spot, like a pantry or basement. It keeps moisture at the right level and prevents rot. Just make sure to cut off the leafy green tops first. Those draw moisture away from the roots and make them spoil faster. For bananas, the key is to store them at room temperature. But here's a trick that not many people know. Separate them from the bunch. Bananas release a natural gas that speeds up ripening, especially when they're grouped together. If you break them apart and give each banana a little space, you can slow down the ripening process by a few days. And once they're ripe, if you can't eat them all right away, just peel and freeze them for later. What about apples and citrus fruits like oranges and lemons? Believe it or not, these also do just fine at room temperature, as long as you don't cut them. A fruit bowl on your counter is not only practical, but it adds a little brightness to your kitchen. Just keep them in a cool, shaded area away from direct sunlight, and they can last over a week without issue. Another one we touched on earlier is onions and garlic. These pantry staples prefer a dry, well-ventilated space. A basket, mesh bag, or open container in your cupboard works perfectly. Just like with root vegetables, make sure there's good air circulation. Don't seal them up in plastic. And once again, don't store them near potatoes. When they're close together, they spoil faster because of the moisture and gases they release. All of these tips are simple, affordable, and proven to work. You don't need anything fancy, just a little attention, and in some cases, a return to traditional storage methods. These small steps help keep your kitchen running smoothly and make your meals more satisfying. And let's be honest, there's something deeply satisfying about knowing how to make your food last. It feels good to waste less, spend wisely, and enjoy what you've already got. The bigger picture: how proper food storage helps your wallet and the planet. We've talked a lot about flavor, texture, and health, but there's something even bigger going on here. Every time you store food the right way, you're not just helping yourself, you're also protecting your budget and helping the planet. Let's start with the financial side. If you're on a fixed income, you know how important it is to stretch every dollar. Groceries have gotten more expensive, and food waste adds up quickly. A few bananas gone too ripe, a moldy loaf of bread, forgotten leftovers in the back of the fridge. It might not seem like much at first, but over time it's money lost. The good news? A few small changes in how you store your food can lead to real savings. Instead of replacing that bunch of bananas every few days, you freeze them for smoothies. Instead of tossing out sprouted garlic or spoiled onions, you keep them fresh longer with proper storage. Fewer spoiled items mean fewer trips to the store, less stress, and more money in your pocket. But the impact doesn't stop there. When food goes to waste, we're not just throwing out the food itself. We're also wasting everything that went into making it: the water, the fuel, the labor, the packaging, and the transportation. All of those resources gone just like that. In the United States alone, we throw away millions of tons of food every year. That's a huge strain on the environment. But imagine this. What if more people just like you, made simple, smart changes at home? What if we each saved just 1 or 2 items a week by storing them better, using them sooner, or freezing them for later? It adds up quickly. And the truth is, many older adults already know how to do this. Maybe you learned it from your parents or grandparents: how to store onions in the basement, keep apples in a box with straw, or use up stale bread for toast or breadcrumbs. That kind of wisdom never goes out of style. In fact, it's more important now than ever. And let's be honest, it feels good. There's a quiet pride that comes from knowing you're making the most of what you have. Instead of tossing things out, you're finding ways to use them. You're showing care for your home, your health, and your world. It's a small act, keeping a tomato on the counter instead of in the fridge, but it's part of a much bigger picture. So when you take a few moments to store your food properly, label your leftovers, or freeze what you don't finish, you're not just organizing your kitchen. You're living more intentionally. You're making a difference for yourself and for those who come after you. And isn't that what wisdom is all about? In the final section, we'll wrap things up with a gentle reflection, and I'll share a few simple steps you can start today to make your food last longer, taste better, and support a healthier life at any age. Let's bring it all together. So let's take a moment to reflect on everything we've shared today. We've talked about bread, bananas, garlic, potatoes, and so many other everyday foods. We've learned that the fridge while helpful, isn't always the best place. And more importantly, we've learned that small changes in how we store our food can lead to big benefits in how we feel, how much we spend, and how we care for our homes. These aren't complicated tips. You don't need fancy storage containers or high-end gadgets, just a little knowledge, a little intention, and a willingness to do things differently. You've already taken the first step by listening, learning, and caring. That says something powerful about you. Maybe the next time you come home from the grocery store, you'll pause before tossing those tomatoes in the fridge. Maybe you'll slice up that loaf of bread and pop it in the freezer before it goes stale. Maybe you'll label your leftovers or keep your herbs in a cup of water by the window. Those little steps, they matter, because this isn't just about food. It's about feeling good, about keeping your independence, about having confidence in your kitchen, about making meals that nourish not just your body, but your spirit. And it's about legacy too. When you care for what you have, when you waste less, save more, and share what you know, you're setting an example. You're showing your children, your grandchildren, and your community that wisdom still matters. That living simply and smartly is something to be proud of. So wherever you are today, whether you're cooking for one, preparing meals for family, or just looking to make your groceries stretch a little further, I want you to know you're doing a great job. You're learning, growing, and taking care of yourself in meaningful ways.